Currently, there are what feels like 1,000 ways to buy a watch: authorized dealers, multi brand boutiques, in person auctions, online dealers, the gray market, and of course, online marketplaces. Bezel is an online marketplace you've surely heard of if you've been collecting for a while, and today's guest, Quaid Walker, is here to tell their story. As one of the three co founders, we delve into his background, Bezel's approach to gaining client trust, and we even chat about collecting sneakers and surfing under the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age Podcast. Hey there.
Hey man, what's going on? How you doing?
Good. Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time. Are you from LA originally?
Born and raised, yeah.
Oh, right on. West Side?
West Side, yeah. I grew up in the Palisades, kind of Malibu area.
How's everybody doing?
It's been crazy. It's been certainly a bizarre couple of weeks, but luckily everyone's safe, and the homes that are lost are replaceable, and the people are all safe. So, but it's been a really crazy couple of weeks for everyone, I think.
Okay, so your family was affected by them, or?
Luckily, my family sold the house that we grew up in, but the house was affected that we grew up in.
Oh no.
And then my girlfriend's house was, she actually stayed and fought the fire, which was a crazy heroic thing. But they saved their home. Their whole neighborhood was affected. You know, a lot of folks in my life were very affected. It was a weird thing where I feel like most natural disasters, it's kind of odd to know someone that's affected. And in this situation, I feel like it was odd to know someone that wasn't affected just because of the sheer density of it. So it
Sure.
was really crazy. But
Wow.
starting to rebuild, which is great.
Right. Yeah, totally. Well, big shout out to everybody affected, and hearts go out to anybody who's really going through it, because I'm sure they are, for sure. One of my best friends works for State Farm. So
Yeah.
he's got numerous clients so his life has been turned upside
I'm gonna
down just
say, I
from a
bet he's getting a
business.
lot of crazy phone calls and
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm assuming like his job is delivering both good and bad news, and I'm sure it sucks in either direction for him. So not a fun
Yeah.
couple of weeks either.
Yeah, that's insane. All right. Well, speaking of work, um, your background as a UX designer. Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, how does one even get into that line of work?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of the intersection of design and technology, I guess is the best way to play it.
Mm-hmm.
I got obsessed with designing things in even as early as high school. I,
Mm-hmm.
I think I knew that I wanted to do something that was on the creative side. I took all the art classes. I just kind of got obsessed with craft in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was, I guess it was probably 2007, right, when the iPhone came out. Like it was just like kind of as I was getting really into design and art, I had like a phone in my pocket, and I think the convergence of those two realities created this new profession, which is kind of interaction design, UX design, product design.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I always like building stuff. I was the kid that like hung out with my dad in the garage, and we would just like make things. That was like a fun thing for me to do. And so there was something so awesome about the ability to make products for the iPhone or for, websites or whatever it was. And I could leverage those design skills that I had always had to put this together. So I started interning as early as high school at design studios. I think it was so early that a lot of these designers that had owned these studios didn't have the same degree of competency with a mobile phone as much as I did because it was new to them as well.
Yeah, you were all kind of learning together.
Exactly. And so it allowed me kind of an upper hand to really dive in and get projects where, it was just net new. Like to take on clients and have us design an app was only happening for a couple of years before I started at the agencies. So I got probably some projects that felt a little meatier than they should have been when I was a little bit younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept doing it through college. There wasn't a lot of classes or anything for it yet because it was still very, very new. So I just took on clients on the side. I consulted through college. Some of the bigger clients were, I worked at the agency. One of the biggest client I was on was Samsung at the time. And I ended up leaving college for a year to just full-time consult.
Wow.
In that process, I think if you like building stuff organically, I think you just start to get obsessed with also building your own concept. So on the side, I would work on a bunch of ridiculous startup ideas and just built a passion around design and building stuff, and then ended up at Google and started Bezel from there.
Wow. That's crazy. Where'd you go to undergrad?
I started at WashU in St. Louis.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I did my first 2 years there, and then I took a year off. I really thought I was going to leave college. It's really kind of what I was saying, where I wasn't learning what I wanted to be doing professionally, and I felt like I was already doing it. So college just felt like an awesome intellectual space for me, but it didn't really feel like it was helping me actualize my goals. So
Totally.
I left for a year and consulted, and then I had such insane FOMO and missed out all the experiences that my friends were having. So I ended up finishing at USC and stayed in LA.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. Stephen Pulverant went to WashU. Did
Yeah,
you know that? Yeah. Are you guys friends?
not super close, but
You've met.
I have met, yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
What did your folks do?
My dad worked in the entertainment industry. So my dad, it's called a gaffer. He did lighting for kind of movies and commercials.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about, and I think his approach with that was always inspiring to me, was it was not just the lighting, but he manufactured the equipment that he used and would own the equipment. And it was kind of like a whole vertically integrated approach, which
Oh, wow.
I don't know, I thought it was a cool way of finding a niche and like really diving very deep into that niche and kind of trying to improve that niche. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think a lot of lessons you learn on the entrepreneurial side are kind of owning the niche that you want to focus on. And I don't know if he would profess that he was trying to convey that to me in any way, but I think he kind of did that without speaking those words. And it
Mm.
was super inspiring to see as a kid growing up.
Oh, that's cool. And did your mom stay at home or was she working?
They actually both worked in the entertainment industry. That's how they met. They met on like a movie set.
Sick.
I think my mom was a program coordinator. Honestly, she'd kill me for not knowing the full title, but she stopped working when I was born and kind of went full mom mode.
I see.
So grew up very much a mama's boy because of that.
Right, right. Yeah, totally. Well, because I saw, I guess on LinkedIn you went to USC Business School, so I wasn't sure if you went there for undergrad or not. But
Yep.
do you feel like your move to go to business school was like a strategic move, or was that more of like you weren't sure what you wanted to do, and that was a great way of networking?
I think I always knew that I wanted to build a business out of the skill set that I had, right? And so when I went to WashU, I was doing a dual degree there. So I was focusing on like not just dual majors, but I had four majors, 2 degrees.
Wow.
I was in the business school. So like my mind at the time, my 18, 17, 18-year-old brain thought, if you want to monetize something, you need a degree in business.
Sure.
I think I've learned very quickly that that's not totally true, but it was an awesome experience. And then I also knew that I wanted to design and build things. So I was in the art school focusing on kind of design and craft. And then I had a second major in computer science. So I wanted to be able to build the stuff that I was working on. Um, and then so when I decided to leave WashU and focus on consulting and building products, then the kind of I want to finish, get my degree, linear path out was to go back and kind of get the business side because I felt like I was getting the design and the practical side on a daily basis through the work that I was doing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I opted for business. It was funny though. It's like I was applying to internships and then ultimately jobs, and I got lucky to land at Google. And my degree, they're like they didn't even look at it because it was from the business school. It had like I was applying to design jobs. It had kind of no say, but it kind of in this chapter of my life, it's been very helpful to
Hmm.
just be able to speak the same language. I don't think you realize how much you retain in a lot of those lectures and seminars that you feel like you're not soaking up everything. You find yourself pitching an investor, and all of a sudden you're able to use the correct lingo and kind of pull out patterns that you learned in case studies from Harvard Business School or whatever it is. So it ended up paying off kind of net long term.
Wow, that's crazy. You hear about these interviews with places like Facebook or Meta and then Google. Like what's a wild question you got in the interview process? Do you remember any?
So it's kind of fun. It's the design interviews are very different and
Okay.
they're super, super practical. And so it's typically like a design challenge. And it's funny because I was at Google for 6 years, so I got to see both the I'm an intern, I'm converting process, and then I'm interviewing process. And then I got to obviously like interview and build out the team that I was working on as well, kind of as a hiring manager.
Mm-hmm.
The way the process works is it's kind of like problem solving puzzle kind of a thing where you'll sit in front of a candidate and you'll say, "Hey, I have this challenge, and I'm designing an elevator, and it's for a 1,000 story building,
Mm-hmm.
and a good chunk of those are retail, and then a good chunk of those are commercial buildings." And then a good chunk of them are retail, and then there's a spot for kids in the middle, or whatever it is, right? Can you help me design the best elevator? Speak out loud as you're talking through it. And it's just
Huh.
designed to have the candidate say, hey, like, let me get on the whiteboard. Like, I would pair it with an app that did this, or I would make you have access to only the floor that you have. And I would intentionally put the retail at the top and the commercial at the bottom and just, you're just trying to understand how people think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super fun. And you have to learn to just not freak out. Because I think the common human response to that is, I don't know anything about elevators. Like I'm here to design digital products. Like, why are you asking this crazy question?
Right.
And it's just fun to see how people think. And so I blew the first one, I think, when I did it. I think I had no idea it was coming, but I think it just challenges you to think, or be open about having crazy ideas and, trying to make them sound serious, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the way the process works. There's not as much of the like crazy, how much does a 747 weigh businessy Google questions that you hear about in case studies. It's more very kind of practical design oriented.
I always heard there was always like a cereal question, I recall. And maybe that was a meta question. It was like, what cereal do you eat in the morning? And they would like judge you based on the cereal you ate.
Yeah, it's so funny too. And I think like a lot of businesses have some creative mechanism to understanding how people think.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? Like I think the famous one is the 747 question and how much it weighs. And it's less about your answer and more about the road you take the interviewer on to understand how you think, right? Like, are you going to break it up into a set of pieces and then you understand that, like, it's a wing is about the size of three cars, and I know a car weighs this, and how to whatever it is, break it out.
Right, right.
And so I don't know if they're still running those. I feel like sometimes they work and sometimes people get flustered and you're not getting the best version of them as they're thinking through it.
Yeah, they're just pissed at you for asking.
Yeah, right. And so I don't know. I think it's definitely part of working at Google is you have to interview.
Sure.
Like you have to interview candidates for jobs at Google once you're at Google. You have to be like on the interviewing track. I used to dread that, to be honest. It was like I just want to do my work. I don't want to be interviewing people. It's the inverse now though. Like as I'm running the company, it's so fun. Like I want to interview everyone that's working here. It's so fun to understand how people think, get to know new people. And I think it's changed the way that I interview. Like I don't ask silly questions like that, but I'd rather just come out straight and be like, how do you think about stuff? Like it's instead of this inverse way of kind of roundabout getting the answer, I'd rather just be direct and make people feel a little bit more comfortable because I think you get the best out of people that way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's the most common question you ask every candidate? And how many people work there now at Bezel?
We're a lot smaller, I think, than folks would think. We're just around 20 people right now.
Okay. Got it.
Um, we like to keep the team pretty lean and hire a bunch of folks with superpowers. I don't know if there's a common question. I think like the way an interview would typically run is obviously the technical questions that you would ask depending on the role. If I'm
Hmm.
hiring for a customer experience role, it's very different than if I'm hiring for an engineering one. I think the big thing is that I understand what they're looking for in their next role, and I want to be honest if we can provide that or not, right? Like if someone wants a very corporate environment that feels, very rigid and like the same thing every day, it's obviously not a 20-person startup that's growing really
Yeah.
fast and
Yeah.
trying to feel like we're a, you know, a multi-billion dollar business when we're 20 people. It's just not the same reality. And so my job isn't to convince anyone to work here. My job is to be honest about, you know, the opportunities here and be very transparent about that. And I think what I've found is the right people tend to raise their hand and be really stoked about that. And the wrong people just doesn't make sense. And that's a win-win if we understand that very quickly.
Do you foresee Bezel being much bigger, or do you think you guys are like pretty good where you're at, or like where are you kind of in your growth trajectory
Super ambitious growth goals this year.
this year?
Yeah, I mean this year and going forward, right? Like I think we're very much on the like want to build the rocket ship path. You know, we love to jokingly say like we kind of just got out of the garage,
Mm.
and we're just you know feeling like we're stepping into those growth trajectories. We've had really ambitious growth the last 2 years. We haven't really even been operating that long. We announced the business in June of 22. And when I say announced, like we pulled the waitlist off, right? And we launched it. And we really announced ourselves in Bloomberg in January of 23. So, you know, it's not been an insane amount of time. And you know the space that we're operating in, we authenticate everything. We have, you know, $700 million in listings in stock. It's taken a while to grow that. But I think the expectation as our average order value is north of $10,000 is really, really high quality execution and polish. And so, unlike any product I've worked on in the past, I think the old trope in building technology is like launch it really fast, iterate quickly, the old like in air quotes move fast and break thing.
Break things, yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if we necessarily had that same luxury because the expectation is I'm spending the most money I've ever spent online with your app or web experience. Like, please don't break things, right? Like, please do this right. And so we just knew that we had one handshake with each customer, and I didn't want to have an awkward handshake. So we spent a lot of time, you know, in the first year making sure the APIs are working right, our fulfillment partners are working right from a delivery perspective. The authenticity team is like really stacked and feeling good. Our sellers had a great experience, whatever it was. And so the first year was kind of like easing into it, and then the last two have been really, you know, attacking the growth side.
Yeah. Who do you consider to be your biggest competition?
It's a great question. I think like there's two types of sellers in the space. There are the inventory sellers and then the marketplaces. Inventory, you know, on you have like, you know, the big players like the, you know, the watch boxes of the world at the kind of largest side, all the way down to kind of like a mom and pop, you know, dealer on the corner that sells jewelry and watches. And then on the far side is the marketplaces. And, you know, that's the like Chrono 24s and eBays of the world. I think the way that we position ourselves is trying to bring the best of both categories. The cool thing about the inventory sellers is they typically, you know, take on that inventory. They're financially responsible for it. They make it nice. We call it retail ready. They sell it to a customer. The challenge with that model is it's super capital intensive and they tend to not have everything you'd want in stock just because it's quite hard to own that much inventory. On the marketplace side, it's the inverse. They tend to have everything you want in stock, but it's up to you as the buyer to shop the seller, do the research, like figure out your comfortability. And it's a little bit of the Wild West in the sense that like, you know, you're kind of responsible for your own fate. A lot of collectors joke out there that like they all have had moments where they've been burned in some way where the watch was in the condition that it shouldn't have been or whatever it was. And it's kind of like on the collector to take that risk.
Yeah.
Our bet was like if we could scale inventory on the marketplace side, but scale trust on the inventory seller side in the sense that we are authenticating every watch that goes through the transaction. We are owning that entire flow. We're checking not just authenticity, we're checking that it's performing the way that it should. We're making sure the condition matches the photography. And if anything deviates from that, your customer experience representative, like your concierge team, is calling you as a buyer and saying, hey, this came in, it's got a little bit more wear than we thought. Here are the detailed photos. What do you want to do with this? I just think like that's the way I wanted to collect as a buyer. And so it's been a super fun experience where I get to take all the apprehension I had as a new collector when I was at Google trying to buy my first watch I bought my first bonus. I spent on a watch, and my mom freaked out. But so it got me down this journey. Um,
What was the watch?
it was a 16610 Submariner, first thing I ever bought, and then my first like this is a watch I had a poster of on my wall was a Hulk. That was the first like really big foray into the secondary market,
Right.
and I'm actually wearing it today. But
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Um, so it seems obviously you were a collector first. What sort of got you into watches? Like, why the Submariner? Why did you? I mean, did you consider other brands other than Rolex when it came to the bonus? Like, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what was sort of the taste, if you will?
It's a great question, and I look back on when we first launched our seed round. Like obviously, I dove very deep into trying to find the earliest photo of me having a watch on, and it was like as a toddler, I wore watches.
Yeah,
I just got obsessed with always having something on my wrist. I grew up surfing, and so I always had like a I don't know like a water driven watch, and so like
sure.
it was like a freestyle shark or
Yeah.
like a Casio, whatever. It was something that it could help me.
Then the Nixons came in, I'm sure.
And high school, Nixon was huge for me because it was like the first moment of being able to express myself. I think it was like not just the utility of wearing a watch.
Yeah,
It's funny because my parents didn't wear watches. It wasn't like I came from a family that got me watches and it was like really exciting. It just felt something that like it was unique and independent to me. The reason I got the 16610 as the first watch is when I was in high school, my dad shot either a commercial or a movie in Asia. He came back with a fake 16610 for me, and I wore it everywhere. I got obsessed with the submit like just the bezel was like being able to spin the bezel was just like a really cool thing as a kid, and I just thought it was a Rolex and it was so exciting. And I wore it till the wheels fell off,
sure.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
And
The bezel probably fell off.
exactly the whole thing was just straws. And
Yeah.
and so yeah, I think it was a cool moment to finally make a little bit of cash myself with like my first real serious job. And it was the largest like sum of money that had landed in my bank account ever getting my first kind of signing bonus for the company.
Yeah.
And so of course I went and bought the real version of the thing that I had always wanted.
That's
I
cool.
think also for watches, so much of my life is digital. And at the time I would clock in at work and I would stare at a screen and it's craft driven. Like I'm obsessed with building and designing really beautiful stuff. But it just felt like it lacked that mechanical thing. It felt ephemeral or temporal. It was like, this digital thing. And so there was something that juxtaposed that, but still had that theme of craft and craftsmanship. And I haven't been able to find anything like it for myself. I obviously it was too early for me to go into the car game at that time. I still like am not as deep, not even close. I think I'm still very much a watch guy. I haven't been bitten by the car bug to the same degree, but I hear a lot of it in kind of the way I hear you talking about cars and some of the other pods that I listen to.
Right. Oh, thanks.
I think it's just like it's a passion for the craftsmanship and the care that went into making these things. The fact that, a watch can last forever if it's well kept and it has this function, but it does it in such a beautifully kind of hilarious way. It's a bunch of gears that are handmade, and that's how you tell the time. And I have it in my pocket on my phone, but there's something that feels so much better about looking at my wrist and taking that like moment out of my day to have that little experience. So I love it so much.
Yeah, totally. And I've said this before. It's like it's the one way to tell the time without being tempted to go down a deep rabbit hole of text messages or emails or notifications in any other way, you know? So it's great. I'm gonna derail this conversation and ask, as a Palisades Malibu guy, were you buying your freestyle watches at Becker's, or like where were you shopping?
That's a deep cut. I love that. My first surfboard ever was a someone had a custom from Becker made and they
Sick.
didn't pick it up. And so I bought it off the rack at Becker.
Nice.
When I say I bought it off the rack, I mean my dad bought it for me off the rack
Sure,
because I
sure,
wanted
sure.
it.
Yeah.
So I'm a big Becker fan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent a lot of time in Becker. I was down in Huntington Beach a lot to surf too. So Jack's was obviously my
Jax,
go-to for
yeah.
boards and Nixons and watches and stuff like that. So
That shop was huge.
that's what the coolest part is they had everything
Yeah.
you wanted in stock. So when it comes to surfboards, they would have every spec possible. And when it came to watches, they would have that like they'd have the Nixon player and the color I wanted and whatever it was, right? So,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, I was not buying a lot of Nixons. Like a Nixon to me was like I got a graduation gift was a Nixon. Like
Yeah.
that was what happened, and it wasn't at this stage of my life where I was being able to buy a lot of these things, and so it was freestyles for a while. It
Yeah.
was like the shark, and it was like we'd go on surf trips, and I would go with a bunch of my friends. One of my co-founders actually, we've been best friends since we were in third grade. We grew up surfing together,
Oh, amazing.
and I have all these hilarious photos of us in Hawaii or whatever on surf trips wearing. It's almost like we had a contest on like the craziest, dumbest colors we could possibly
Oh,
wear on our
yeah, yeah,
wrists.
yeah.
But it was something about you were just wearing board shorts and that watch, and it looked cool in photos, and so we wore it.
The player, man, it had that solitary diamond in it. Like, that's just so sick.
That was a heavy statement, back
Yeah.
in whatever that was, 2008.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Um, what are you still surfing today? Or, I mean,
Yeah,
obviously you're probably super busy with work, but living in Venice, are you a Venice Pier guy or like where do you
I'm
go?
not. So I grew up surfing in Malibu.
Okay, sure. First point?
I grew up surfing Joe's, which I don't want to blow up the spot, but it's just past Third Point in front of the Colony, and I'm
Yep.
goofy, so it's like one of the only lefts.
It's
And
good left. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyone that I grew up surfing there would kill me for shouting it out publicly, but because I want no crowds there ever. But I grew up surfing that part of Malibu, all up and down Malibu, up to like Ventura.
Sure.
And then when the swells changed and it got smaller and it was kind of winter time, I spent more time kind of down south. So
Yeah.
I'm surfing everywhere from, Porto and Manhattan
I was
Beach.
about to say Porto's good. Yeah, the winter is great at
I
Porto.
know you're in San Diego. Not a lot of time in San Diego. I've surfed blacks a few times, but kept it really kind of, LA Orange County.
Yeah, I living in North County. I usually stick to this area, Encinitas, Cardiff, that kind of spots. But I lived in LA for 5 years, and I loved Topanga. I opened the James Purse store in Malibu, the big black one. So I would skip out on lunch and I would go walk to surf and come
Yeah.
back to work. So it was mostly like those days it was like second or third point, just due to the fact of like it was a shorter walk and a little punchier wave and a lot less crowded. So yeah, would just tuck the board under my arm and run,
I love
basically.
that. I love that store too. They did such a nice job with that. So congrats on that. That's
Oh yeah, thanks. It is, yeah, for sure. And now James has basically taken over the entire lumberyard, but which is really funny.
yeah.
Would you? I didn't have this written down, obviously, but your co-founder you've known since you were 9, I guess, or thereabouts. What advice would you have for those starting a company? Because they say never go into business with friends or family. So you've done it.
Yeah, and it's been awesome. So I have two co-founders. One of them is Chase, the one that I was mentioning, and the second is Daryl. Daryl and I have history as well. We built an app together in college. We he worked at Google as well. We spent a lot of time together. And so I think going to business with your friends simply because you're friends is not the right decision. I think
Got it.
going into business with people that you know that you can trust when you need to trust them and they happen to have complementary skill sets and similar work ethics and mentalities, I think is the best thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like I'm so lucky to have these guys by my side here because we just complement each other in a really nice way. Chase has a finance background. He worked at different hedge funds, long short kind of publicly, and he worked at JP Morgan and just like at a lot of different places. And
Sure.
then Daryl is our CTO. He's amazing at building really, really high quality products. And so
What a perfect trifecta, man.
exactly. It worked out obviously very intentionally.
Yeah.
When I wanted to build this product, like they were the one and two calls that I made, and luckily they said yes to me. So I
Yeah.
think I like to think that my entire career was building up to getting them to say yes to work on this with me. So I think if anything, that's the whole purpose of my resume, and it's been awesome to work with them. I think like undeniably there is bickering back and forth and there's a comfortability with each other because you're willing to maybe say the thing that you wouldn't say if, we were very professional co-founders that just met each other. But I think that's important. And I think what ends up happening is there's a certain respect between all of us where if I'm wrong about something, I'm going to tell you I'm wrong about this, but I'm going to make you sometimes probably work for it a little bit more than you would have if I was just like a person you were working with.
I also think that dovetail into that same thing is like, but then when things are good and you receive like a compliment from them, you know it's a high compliment because you know what their tastes are and like their levels of expectations and sort of that kind of thing where you're like, when they say, oh man, that's a genius idea, you know they actually mean it. You know what I mean? So I think that like free flowing dialogue of like maybe uninhibited word choices, perhaps at times, is super helpful.
And I think it like our connection transcends the business that we are building, and I think it just makes the seriousness of what we're doing and the commitment that we're doing all the more real in the sense that like there's not a there's not a there's not a backing out of this. Like the only
Yeah.
way out is through.
Yeah.
And it just makes us really lucky. Like we're working with people we like to work with and we would spend time with outside of the office solving a problem that we're all obsessed with because we all love watches.
Yeah.
And it just makes the job the best job on the planet because I'm hanging out with my friends building cool stuff. And it allowed us to build a culture around that where everyone in the office has gotten really close. It's still a tight team. We're a very in-office culture. So majority of folks are in the office every single day. And so I just think it's super important for scaling the degree of business that we want to scale.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting given the timeline, right? Because you were basically launching, and it was still COVID. So, like, having an in office culture, was that a hurdle at all for you guys? Or because it was mostly startup phase, was everybody just kind of online anyway?
Yeah, I think it was like a bit of the function of the business that we're building, right? Like everything ships to our in-house authentication team. We own that whole process. So it's just kind of like a function of what we're doing. It requires a lot of people to be in the office to actually be hands-on with those watches. And then also the majority of people that we're hiring want to work with us because they're obsessed with watches.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to be on the office if you know all these grails are constantly coming in every day and you can like peer through the watchmaking window and look at
Mm-hmm.
them being worked on? Like it's such a cool experience. So I think it was a bit of that. And I think it just felt like a little bit of a momentum shift in the kind of perpetuation of this, work from home mentality right when we launched. Like we raised our first round in August of 21. That's like when we officially quit our last jobs. But we spent about a year kind of remote, bringing everyone together, building the infrastructure. And then when we really launched in 22, I think folks started to realize like, on the investment side, on the leadership side, hey, like actually businesses perform better when they're all together and they're working and they're kind of a copacetic unit. We
Yeah.
still have remote employees. Like we have a small office in New York. We have folks that prefer to jam in a hybrid schedule because they just need the heads down space to hammer out code or whatever it is. And so it's not super stringent. I think the majority of us just like to be in the office and around each other while we're working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. What was sort of the problem you were solving by starting this business? Like, what was sort of the point, if you
Yeah,
will?
100%. And I think that's the fun part about what we're doing is it was a problem that I felt and my co-founders felt. It wasn't like we identified a market opportunity. It was like we wanted something better.
Mm-hmm.
When I was trying to buy that Hulk, I was told by every collector I knew to not use a competitive marketplace.
Mm.
I was told by the ones that said it was maybe okay to do that to be very careful. And I didn't know how to authenticate a Rolex. I didn't know anyone from anyone on the seller side. I didn't know who to pay attention for. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what to do. And so I found myself spending a lot of time getting to know different dealers, but they wouldn't have what I wanted in stock. And it just ended up, being a very laborious process to ultimately spend whatever it was, $13,000 on the internet. And I had grown up collecting other things. Like I collected sneakers and I had used products like StockX and Goat. And my expectation as a relatively new collector that understood technology was like I just thought there would be a managed marketplace that felt really technologically forward and easy to use and ultimately authenticated everything and stood by the transactions that occurred on their system. And so that was really the pain problem. It was like how many buyers out there are looking for the watch they want, but they're not totally comfortable diving into the secondary watch market because it kind of feels like a little bit of an insider's club that's kind of intimidating for a first time buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing on the first time buyer side is even from my experience, like it felt like a lot of the industry cared a lot about the whales and the repeat buyers, but there wasn't a lot of focus to, the user education, helping people get into their first watch. And my bet was if we could build the best place to buy your first watch, you would come back and you'd buy a second watch and a third watch and a fourth watch from us. And all those whales out there had to buy their first watch somewhere. So it was an opportunity to kind of build a moat around the market and then also to just grow the total addressable market by making it less intimidating to buy a watch. So the kind of initial product offering is still what we're consistent with today. We wanted to scale as much inventory as we could from the best sellers in the US. So we have just around 700 million in listings today. So theoretically anything you could want, we have in stock. We
Sure.
wanted to pair every buyer with a concierge in house. So I want a real person in our office to know your name, be assigned to you. You have their phone number, you have their calendar. You can jump on the call and jam from what watches should I surf in? Is that a crazy idea? To, I want this very specific watch. It needs to be a 1994 Datejust. It's for my birth year or whatever it is. And then I wanted to make sure everything was authenticated in-house. So we own that entire flow. When the transaction occurs, we send the label out to the seller. Seller overnights to us. It goes through multiple touch points and hands in our office. So our first hire was Ryan Chong. He came over as a director of private sales from Sotheby's, the auction house, came
Cool.
in, built out kind of our internal authentication team. We have auth specialists from kind of the auction worlds. We have watchmakers on staff. A watch will go through multiple auth specialist hands. They're checking to make sure authenticity, scholarship, everything looks right. Moves over to the watchmakers. They're doing a full diagnostic check. They're looking at all components of the watch from a watchmaking perspective, time loss, pressure, making sure it's working in the way that it should. And then it gets run against a loss registry to make sure it's never reported stolen. Net, the goal is be the strictest set of checks in the industry while scaling the inventory to be commensurate of a lot of the large competitive marketplaces out there so that we have the best pricing, the best inventory, and the highest degree of trust, right? And the goal there is just ultimately allowing these collectors to get what they want and put it on their wrist and go pop the champagne and celebrate it versus, spending time thinking if they have to get it double checked somewhere or worry about it.
Yeah, worried about it. Yeah. Sneakers side note. What sneakers were you in?
I was in kind of everything. Never from like a investment perspective, just because I thought it was like a cool, expressive thing to wear at the office. Being a designer, we would kind of like always flex on each other, where everyone had good taste in the office, and so I got into like a bunch of different, Nike collabs. I got really into a few set of Adidas, but mainly Nikes. I think is what I'm wearing a pair of Air Force Ones right now.
Okay, Air Force Ones. What's the best Jordan of all time?
Jordans are not really my space.
Really?
I think I look kind of dumb in them personally.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of the Travis Scotts. So I'm wearing the like right now I just got a pair of the like reverse green ones, not the mochas, but the whatever the green one is those are.
Right.
So I'm wearing those a lot. But yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not like a huge sneakerhead in the sense that like I really commit to it, but I do have a closet full of hundreds of, hype sneakers that I think are cool. And so I kind of just, I'm a great example of why I thought we could grow the market from a watch perspective by building access. Someone showed me GOAT when I was in the office, and I just bought hundreds of pairs of sneakers that I thought were cool.
Wow.
And it was less about the obsession of like, I'm collecting sneakers and more about like, oh my God, these are really rad and I can't get them anywhere else. I'm going to buy them.
So the real heads know Air Force Ones, as sometimes they're referred to as uptowns. Now, do we keep them clean? Do we worry about creasing them? Are we one use only, like popping tags on socks? Like, what are we doing?
No, we beat shit up. I
Oh,
think
sick.
I'm the same way with watches. My Hulk, I love Submariners. So I have a couple Submariners, but like my surf watch is the one is a different instance of a 16610.
Oh,
That's
cool.
like my run watch, my surf watch, my wear it around. We have we had an amazing photographer come into the office and shoot like really up close photos of watches, and they looked at my Hulk. And their response was, "This is the most disgusting Hulk I've ever seen in my life because it had like surf wax in it and it was beat up." And I just think that these are tools and things to wear, and I shouldn't be flippant and dumb about it. Like I
Right.
service my watches and I make sure everything's right. But I don't know. I think there's something cool about wearing the objects that you have and treating them the way that they should be treated. Not they're not sitting in a safe. They're being worn and I think that adds character. Obviously, watches handle it better than sneakers, but with a pair of Air Force Ones, I can always just get another pair if they get too thrashed.
Yeah, totally. I have a buddy, Jonathan, shout out John, who has probably the most beat up Batman you'll ever see in
I
your
love
entire
that.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
how it's got to
it's
be.
yeah.
And it's funny
So,
too, because like when I first bought the Hulk, I chose the Hulk
mm,
because it didn't, in my opinion, take itself seriously. Like
a
it was like a
cartoon.
watch guy's everyday watch, in my opinion. And it was
Yeah.
like who like I don't know. I at retail, I think at the time it was like an $8,000 watch. I think I paid 13 for it, which felt insane to me at the time, maybe 12 for it. And now obviously the prices are crazy, but at that price, it felt like I could wear it every day, and I knew that I could trust the fact that it was a tank.
Hmm.
Now I feel a little bit dumb saying that they're they're knocking on the $20,000 watch door. It feels weird. Like I used to go on surf trips and surf in it, and I would wear it every day. And I there's something so romanticized in my mind about not taking this thing off and waking up in the morning. I sleep with a watch. Like
Oh, funny.
I like to always have them on, and there's something cool about like just being like rescue ready at any point in time, and just like having the thing on, waking up, going to the beach, having a day, going to the gym, wearing it, going to the office, then having to head to dinner, throw on a suit jacket for an event, go back, go to sleep, and like the same watch was on my wrist the entire time.
Right.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way that I think about collecting.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. So it seems like you're really into Rolex. Are you into other brands, or like what other brands
Yeah,
do you
totally. So
gravitate
I
to?
think like the cool thing about Bezel in my eyes is that it's allowed for me to have liquidity. Like it's really hard to sell as a retail seller without us, in my opinion, and get full liquidity out of your watch. Just because if you want to sell in a competitive marketplace, you've never sold before, so
Hmm.
people are looking at like your reviews and previous transactions, and they're probably going with the pro dealers versus you. And if I walked into I've done this multiple times with other watches I've owned. Like you walk into a dealer, they build in a margin there, and it's challenging to get the full value out of it. So
Hmm.
the fun part about running the marketplace has been I've been kind of a guinea pig where I've been able to buy and sell way more watches than I probably should be doing as a startup founder.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've been playing with a lot of brands and a lot of stuff. I think Rolex has always been the densest part of my collection just because I love the durability associated with a lot of the models. Like, I love Submariners because I like to spend a lot of time in the water, but big Daytona guy. Love Daytonas. I love APs. Have owned a bunch of different Royal Oaks. And yeah, just I think Rolex and AP are my one and two right now. Haven't like spent a lot of time owning Pateks, but obviously like that's kind of what I'm eyeing right now. But it's so fun where I've been able to kind of like grow up as a watch collector while running the business.
Yeah.
And yeah, so a lot of things on the list this year.
What's your favorite Daytona?
I mean, obviously a Le Mans in white gold is the
Okay.
my favorite
Sure.
modern Daytona. I love like older 6265s. Like I like a steel bezel
Bezel.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think and then as far as like modern that's attainable, Love the white gold Oyster Flex with a steel dial. Big fan of that watch.
Is that gray dial?
They call it steel dial, but yeah, it's the
Yeah,
gray
yeah, yeah.
dial one. I think it's like such an epic color combination with the black ceramic bezel.
Hmm.
I love the black dial ceramic steel Daytona. Owned that for a really long time. Love that watch. I love the Panda. I like all of it. I
Yeah.
think a sleeper is kind of John Mayer's counterpart, the white gold blue.
Blue?
I don't think
Totally
gets
agree.
enough love at all. If that watch was a steel watch, I think it would have been like the craziest thing ever, and everyone would be freaking out about it. But for some reason, because it's white gold, it like flew under the radar, and everyone loved the yellow gold green. So love
Well,
that watch.
this is also where I get confused because both the yellow gold green and the white gold blue were announced within seconds of each other on the same video. So why is it that the green gold was the John Mayer quote unquote? Like how did the white gold get lost in the shuffle and not be considered like, I don't know, John Mayer A and B? You know what I mean?
Totally, that's a great point. I don't remember in that talking watches. Did John talk about both of them, or did he just talk
Yeah.
the?
Yeah, and in fact, if you look closely, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it is the blue dial variant, still has stickers on it.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. God, that
So,
video is. I remember watching that. It's so funny to talk about that video and be in the position that I am right now because I remember watching the video as a
like live or whatever. Yeah.
obsessed collector. Yeah,
Not live, but like when it was released. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, it's crazy, and I just to see the secondary market value and the delta between those two watches blows my mind, and always has. Um, I think the way that I like to collect though is I tend to buy watches that I think wear nicely with the kind of clothes that I wear and like the vibe that I set. And there's
Totally.
a lot of watches that I think are like really beautiful, but they're not me. And I've owned a lot of watches that I think are really like I've owned, really rose gold, ever rose dial Daytonas with diamonds on them. And I just did like I like look at it and I'm like, this is objectively such a beautiful object.
Yeah.
But then I put it on my wrist, unless I'm in Miami or Vegas, I put it on my wrist and I'm like, what am I? Like I like to get up early in the morning and go surfing. I wear like Air Force Ones and sneaker. Like what am I doing right now? This doesn't look right. And
Right.
so I think the yellow gold green Daytona is like one of those ones for me where I'm like, oh, what a watch. But I
Yeah.
can't, it's not my watch. I can't wear that watch. It's not the watch
Right.
that I can wear. Whereas the white gold blue is a little bit more like under the radar. That's my style. It plays nicely with the lifestyle I think I have.
So, do you own that watch?
I don't, no, no, no. But
Oh,
we
okay.
we see it. We sell a ton of them,
Yeah.
and I see them come through all the time. And it's one of those watches where I get a special ping if it's coming through, so I can just like watch it get worked on because I love it so much.
Oh, that's funny. And I wonder, like, now that I'm going back on my like hypothesis as to the green gold versus like why they're not A and B or whatever. I'm wondering if it's because John has actively been seen wearing the green gold and like photograph. Because like I don't think I've ever seen him wear the white gold blue dial.
I don't know. You don't
And
see anyone wear the white gold blue dial.
no one.
It's just like a slept on watch that's such a stunning piece.
Yeah.
And the market likes blue dials more than they like green dial. It doesn't make sense, but I just think that there is something captivating around yellow gold with green.
Yeah.
You see that like, with the day dates as far as the value scales. You see that with the yellow gold GMT with the green dial. You see that with in a slightly different shade of gold, but you see that with the kind of olive day date. Like all of those commands
Mm-hmm.
premium, and I think the market just loves the gold green combo.
Yeah. I guess John's also on record as saying like he gifts himself his watches from time to time. So like
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why the stickers were still. He hasn't given himself that watch yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that's something to do with it. Anyway, not to harp on John too much, but like, yeah, he's got plenty to wear. And then now as a AP ambassador or creative director or whatever he is, I can't remember, creative consultant, whatever.
Yeah.
He's kind of, probably somewhat obligated to only wear AP. But although he's been seen in that Journe a lot, like last year.
Yeah. On stage, just jamming away in a
Yeah.
in a Journe is crazy to me. It's such a
Right.
funny. I love that. I mean, he's a great example of someone that just wears wears his watches and
Yeah.
does the same stuff and is on stage with a guitar slamming away with like a crazy piece on it. I think that's so
Yeah.
cool.
So Bezel's established obviously in Los Angeles. Why did you do it there as opposed to say Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so I was actually living in San Francisco when we started the company.
Right.
My co-founder Chase was living in New York, and
Mm.
my third co-founder Daryl was living like in Silicon Valley, like Menlo Parky, Palo
Yep.
Alto area.
Yep.
Um, Chase and I are from LA, so obviously like there was always an interest in coming back to LA, and it was really kind of like 3 points for us in the US. It was New York, LA, or Miami were kind of the spots to be. None of
Okay.
us really have a strong affinity for Miami. No shade to the Miami folks out
But the
there.
surf sucks.
It wasn't us. And I think New York felt like the logical place from a business perspective, but it just didn't feel like there was something net new about starting a watch company in New York.
Hmm.
And we liked the weather better in LA. So we came out to LA, and it just happened to work, I think, really nice with the brand's ethos because a lot of what we're doing is interfacing with dealers, and like a lot of that is 47th Street, New York, Miami, whatever it is. But the other aspect of our side is like brand building. A lot of our investors are in kind of the celebrity space and live around Los Angeles, so content is a lot easier. And I think our interest was like building a true brand that sat at the intersection of collecting and like the underbelly of the secondary watch market and doing something in the middle. So LA felt like the right thread, but at the same time, this is all justification. And honestly, it was just the best place to get a nice, cool, airy office where the weather was always nice and we're close to the beach.
Yeah, totally. What's been the hardest part?
I think the challenge with building a marketplace is just like you have two customers. Your goal is to build the best experience for the buyer, but at the same time to do right by the seller and everything that you're doing. And oftentimes that is challenging. Like they sometimes butt heads where a watch will come in and it is maybe not in the exact condition it should be. So we would 100% protect the buyer, but also the seller is like any other platform that would have gone on. Why
Hmm.
should I keep selling with you? And so a lot of that has been doing right by the buyer, but keeping our sellers like really read into like our long-term vision here, where it's like, nope, like trust us. If we block this transaction from happening, the buyer is going to love us more. We're going to build a bigger business here. You're going to end up net selling more watches through.
Hmm.
If you're a really good seller, we're going to do more business than you would somewhere else. Like we're going to get there.
Yeah.
A lot of that has been building tools to help sellers run their business, like building everything possible to make it as easy as possible for them to sell watches. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the push and pull. I think also generally speaking, supply has been easier for us. Like we've been able to scale supply really quickly. The challenge is always demand. And how do I make someone feel comfortable being a new business, buying $10,000 plus items on an app? Like that's a crazy
Hmm.
ask.
Hmm.
And we sell cheapest watch we've sold is probably $750. Most expensive is $1.2 million. So like we've
Wow.
sold everything along the spectrum on any given day. We're selling six-figure pieces and we're selling a lot of, $1,000, $2,000 pieces. And the challenge is like we launched, we weren't operating very long, and the expectation is like perform as the business by selling really expensive items on the internet. And a lot of that brand building trust has been like walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Like that's why I'm upset. Like if you read any of our Trustpilot reviews, it's like it's not just wow, their app is great or their investors are cool or the thesis is great. It's like no, I got on the phone with Blake, my concierge at Bezel, and he made me feel so safe and he was amazing to work with and the people there are great. And so I think a lot of what I'm trying to do is not take the human interaction away from watches,
Yeah.
even though we are a digital marketplace. And I think there's an opportunity to do that because like the items we're selling in comparatively to other marketplaces are so expensive. Like if you look at a Goat or a StockX, like I'm sure their average order value is like $300, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Our average order value is $10,000. There's like meat on that bone to really delight the user, and our job is to go above and beyond to do that, right? Like we shouldn't be compared against other customer experiences across different verticals. We should be doing way more because buying a watch for most people is the largest amount of money aside from maybe a house or a car they've ever spent.
Totally.
It should feel like you're popping the champagne, you're celebrating with us. It shouldn't feel like you're nervous or apprehensive or frustrated at all. Our job is to go above and beyond. And so as we were small and early, we just obsessed with, in another air quotes tech moment of doing things that don't scale. And then I
Hmm.
think what we found is as we've built more and more, these things actually do scale, and we've been able to build a full business around that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Walk us through the marketing, like as far as like early days of promoting the business. I've obviously heard you on several of my favorite podcasts as far as advertising goes.
Amazing.
Um,
So we're really close with Chris Black. Okay, in the early days, we did some positioning work, and Chris's firm came over, and it's called Done to Death.
yeah, no,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chris came over to do some positioning work, and Done to Death, the campaign was run by Chris and then Bryn from Dime Piece.
I see.
So they were kind of our 1-2 punch in the beginning before we even had a marketing department that kind of helped us. We did like an initial launch at Soho House in Miami, and they kind of put all that together, and they helped us with like our early messaging and things like that. So know
Okay.
Chris very well.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Yeah, to bring it full circle with like the initial question of the brand thing, like when we first raised money, I think the biggest thing that's possible and or the important if you're running a business is like recognizing your own weaknesses.
Hmm.
I'm really good at building products. I think one of my bigger strengths in the space for the watch world is that like I don't come from the watch world. I'm more representative of our core customer, like someone that is, owns 5 or 6 watches and is obsessed with it, but like is pretty in the scope of like other people working in the watch world, green here.
Yeah.
And I think the same recognition with the brand world. It's like one of the partners from the venture firm that led our seed was like, "You guys are awesome, but like you're not that cool." Like, and I was like, "That's crushing to hear, but I believe you." He was like, "You got to get someone in that like is cool and like understands how to really like make your video. I understand that you have a vision that you want to make this happen, and it's very tactile, but like." Someone needs to execute on that and like help you build that path.
Yeah.
Chris is one of the first people that came in that is undeniably cool and kind of speaks the right language and got the ball moving in the right direction to kind of get us on our feet to make that happen. So I think from a brand perspective, our bet was that we could build something that felt like what like modern watch collectors resonated with.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of that was like the brand should feel high trusted and honest and transparent, but it also has to have like a certain not unapproachable, but like intrigue around that.
Hmm.
The way that we built that trust and kind of interesting approach in the beginning was just through our investors. So the 0 to 1 approach is like if no one trusted us, no one knew anything about us, we wanted to make sure that we had names around us that helped support that. So we were very lucky to raise capital from like the John Legends and Steve Aoki's and Kevin Hart's and Jay Balvin's of the world that are massive, massive watch collectors that stood for trust. And we could go out and tell the narrative that like these folks were buying from us, so you could as well. And that got us kind of moving in the right direction in the beginning. And then it became, leveraging that into partnerships of other brands we liked. So we're in Equinox's circle. We partner with a lot of large banks. We did some work with Soho House, like, partnering with other pods of really cool potential collectors. And then as far as like our own marketing goes, it's really just being honest about our story and like walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Like we're not throwing any marketing fluff out there. Like we're out just telling the stories of the fakes that we caught or the delight that the customers had. We obsess over like getting reviews written by our customers and having them do the marketing for us. It's funny that we're talking today. We just launched a bunch of new ads, like a new ad campaign, and it's like, you know, headshot interviews of our authentication specialists or of our watchmakers or some of our customers, like talking about what they care about and why they do their job.
Hmm.
And it just those have tested really well. And so that's kind of the brand that we want to build. Like it frames the watches we sell and the experience we've built. It doesn't get in the way, but it feels like, I'm wearing a hat from us today. If I see someone wearing that hat, like I want it to stand for, like I probably have a bunch of cool watches at home. I care about where I bought it. I bought it in kind of a newer, fresher way.
Hmm.
I'm a modern collector. And that's, are we there yet? Not even close. I think that it's going to be a multi-year journey. And I think that, it's super fun to watch the progress as we get there.
Yeah. Do you guys give away those hats with every purchase kind of thing? Or like what's
Not with every purchase. But
$1.2 million watch maybe?
yeah, they'll get a hat for sure. But no, I think if collectors ask for it, we send it. We do a lot of events.
Cool.
We do gifting things, whatever. So if anyone wants a hat, hit us up.
Nice. Well, I mean, you've mentioned it, investing and investors. You've got a list a mile long, as you mentioned. What's your advice for raising capital, and how'd you guys go about it? I mean, obviously Chase came from like the banking sort of not trust fund. What did you say? Hedge fund world, which is mega millions hedge funds. Was that his sort of baby to take charge with? Is raising money or
Unfortunately, the finance world that he came from is a bit different, so there wasn't a lot of overlap there.
okay?
But however, like Chase and I handled fundraising together. We both crushed that, and in many ways, in some of our more recent fundraisers, like I went back to building product, and Chase took the reins even more. So couldn't have done it very much without Chase. Yeah, the way that we thought about it, I think my advice for founders is can be broken down into kind of like why you're fundraising is kind of point one, and point two is I guess like execution and how to get it done. On the why side, like it's contingent on the market. And like if capital's really easy, cheap, and free, then you should take it. And I think when we raised our first round, it was in 2021 when everyone felt super rich and all these funds were throwing money at investments at crazy valuations. And so like we raised our first round with the pitch deck. We had not built a business or anything. And we scaled it up from there and we got a pretty substantial seed round done. And so it made sense to do that. I think if the market's different, like, and you're going to take really dilutive terms, you might evaluate, like, should I bootstrap this, prove out, get to some revenue point that's more interesting, and then go raise? Or do I even need to raise? Can I free myself from the venture cycle entirely? The way that we thought about fundraising, I think the best piece of advice that we got was think about fundraising as a tool, not just capital. Like what can you do to give you an unfair advantage for the problem you're trying to solve, the business you're trying to build by the partners you bring on. And so it's kind of what we were talking about with a brand perspective. We knew it would be really hard to convince folks to transact on our platform when we just didn't exist for years, right? Like
Yeah.
why would you trust this new company popping up saying they're going to sell you watches just because they raised money? So we intentionally built brand through the investors that we had. So we wanted to make sure we got like big collectors on the cap table to get, the marketing movement starting. We also knew that it would be a bit of a journey to build the best experience for our sellers. So we went out and we like intentionally got a lot of the biggest dealers on as investors or getting, folks that hold big sums of watches on as investors. So they would sit down and whiteboard with us and help us build them the tools that they need to make them interested in using our product, right?
Hmm.
So I think using fundraising as a mechanism to build a better business is the most important thing. It's not just capital. So that's kind of like advice A. Once you decide that you're going to fundraise and like who you want, I think the best piece of advice that I've gotten is like, it's all relationship driven.
Yeah.
It's so funny, like in a good market, a lot of VC funds that are in our round will tell us like, hey, like be a little sheepish. Like don't be easy to get. Like if a fund wants to talk to you, tell them you're busy. Like tell them you don't have time. We've kind of done the inverse where I like a fund. I want to text with them. Like I want to know the partner I like and I want to get lunch with them a lot and I want to talk to them and I
Hmm.
want to tell them we're going to do this so that when we do that, they're like, "Oh shit, they told me that they were going to do that."
Yeah.
Like they actually were good on their promise. Like I want to get involved in this business. And so I think the relationship is really important. And then when you want to run a process, like we like tight processes, like and what we say by that is like, stacking your meetings to make sure you're doing like, 50 of them in your first week. So if one fund is like, I want to do this, then it like makes the urgency all of a sudden increase. So you get one
Hmm.
yes, and all the other ones have to start thinking a little bit more seriously about you. They don't have time to like overanalyze everything. They just have to jump to a yes if they feel like they want the deal. And so
Sure.
that's what's worked to us in the past. But it's a grind, and you're going to hear a lot of no's, and you just got to be real comfortable, knowing that you'll probably find the yes, once you find the right person.
Yeah. Have you ever had any, I mean, obviously without naming names, have you had any bad experiences with investors?
Look, I don't know if it's bad, but I've certainly been like crushed more times than I can count, right? I think the whole journey is that you have to go into it knowing that like you have to be unbelievably vulnerable and put your whole self behind the business and the pitch. And I
Yeah.
think anytime you put your whole self behind anything, you leave yourself open to someone saying no to you. And there's no like, well, I didn't even care. It's like, no, like everyone in this room knows that this is the most important thing in the world to me, and I believe in
Sure.
this more than anything. And you don't. And like, that sucks. But I think for all the bad that happened, like the good moments are the most exciting part. And I think all the best funds will write you a note when they say no. And you kind of are like, they're just saying that. But I think they genuinely mean it. And the note always says, like, hey, we really love you. It's just not the right fit for us. But we get this wrong all the time. And we're rooting for you. Like, we hope we're wrong, and we usually are. And it's just right. Like the number of insanely valuable businesses that heard no's from all the top funds or whatever, and they just got one yes from a top fund.
Right.
It's like countless. I think like every single entrepreneur that is like an absolute badass multi-billion-dollar business right now had a bunch of people tell them that they didn't get it, right? Like I'm
Sure.
sure like I love Brian Chesky from Airbnb just because he's like a design-driven founder.
Hmm.
They had an absolutely crazy idea. Everyone thought they were insane. Like,
Right.
you want to rent out your couch and have strangers sleep on it? Like, what are you talking about?
And he was doing that.
100%. And so all of the earliest investors were like, you're nuts. Like, get out of here. And
Yeah.
it took one of them to say yes. And, it was probably one of the best investments the fund ever made, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's about finding people that believe in your journey, not just the best names, because these are the people that you're going to have to call when shit hits the fan, and shit will hit the fan. It always does.
Hmm.
And you don't want someone that was just there because they thought it was like a cool return opportunity. You want someone that's like, no, like I believe in you guys. I believe in the team. I believe in the vision. Like I want to help support this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Um, Early days, you're in the garage with your dad. Earlier, you were saying that you haven't gotten into cars as far as collecting goes, but I'm dying to know what is the daily driver.
For that I'm at right now,
Yeah, what drove up Lincoln this morning?
I have a Range Rover.
Okay, which one?
I have a Velar, like the
Okay, sure.
midsize one.
Yep.
I got it in 21 in San Francisco. I had just gotten a dog, and before that, I had a Taycan just as they
Sure.
came out.
Yep.
And I got that car, and I was like, you know what? This doesn't work for a dog. Like, who am I to have this right now? It's like just a weird thing to have happen. And I was lucky enough that I got one of the first Taycans that were delivered because I had put a reservation down for a very long time. I was obsessed with Porsche, and I had owned a Tesla prior to that, and I was like, I want an electric Porsche. This sounds cool.
I see.
In retrospect, like not the Porsche to own in my opinion, but I at the time I wanted it, and I got it, put it in the garage, owned it for a week, drove it around a little bit, and then the ended up selling it for more money than I paid for it because the wait list was so long. So owned that thing for a week and went straight to like what is the most dad car? I'm not a dad, but like what is the
Dog dad. Yeah.
dog dad comfortable car that I can just like throw a surfboard in, but was still mid-size enough that I could park in San Francisco. And so that's where the Velar landed, and
Right.
I've owned it ever since, and haven't switched out.
Were you an Ocean Beach guy? Is that where you surfed?
I did surf OB a lot, but I lived in kind of like North Marina, right by like the Palace of Fine Arts for anyone that knows San Francisco. And
Sure.
so I I surfed OB a lot, and then I would go kind of down south a lot and kind of try to find something that like was a little bit like kind of meatier sometimes when Obi was a little bit blown out. And my thing about Ocean Beach was if you saw the cam and it was good, you already missed it. You missed your interval or your window. It was such like a blind trust thing, and you had to just like look at the conditions the night before and just commit. And you got skunked a lot. But it's funny. I'll tell a quick story about surfing in the Bay. My co-founder and I, Chase, grew up surfing together. About 6 months before starting the company, we were surfing in Montera, which is like, a little bit south. It's like almost Half Moon Bay.
Okay.
And he was in New York at the time, so he came out and visited. And I was like, dude, we're gonna go surfing in the morning. It's gonna be like kind of like tuck in barrels, big day. You're not gonna make it, but we're gonna have some fun. And I hadn't seen him in a while, and it ended up being obviously way smaller than I thought it would be. And so the first wave, he's paddling out, I catch, and he's paddling out, and it's this fun moment for those that surf, like where you have an opportunity to do a turn in front of your buddy when he's paddling out,
Spray him.
spray him, and I overcommit to the turn, and I try to blow my tail out, and I bury the nose, and the board shoots back, and the fin slit my whole face open. Fin went through my cheek, whole thing, and the water was so cold, so I didn't know what was going on, and you think that
You're just maybe bleeding or
you can
something.
taste blood a little bit, and I paddle back up to Chase, and he was like, "Dude, like we gotta get you out of the water. Like it's super sharky here right now." And I was like, "What?" It's like just my lip. And he was like, "No, like your face is flopping off."
Oh my God.
He got in my car. I drove my car. I just had to hold it at the hospital. It was in the middle of COVID, obviously. So like there's no plastic surgeons open. So just I was in the UCSF hospital, just luckily getting sewed up by a plastic surgery resident there at the time or whatever. But it's so funny. It's like in the initial pitches that we were doing, we had went to go out and try to raise money like 8 months or so later. We had like a team slide, and I was sitting there chasing. I was like, we should put the because there's a photo of like us arm in arm, and my face. I look like the Joker. Like my face is all cut up.
Yeah, I can't even tell. I don't know if it's the camera or what.
It healed well, which is great. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was like 40 some stitches, and I looked like a crazy person. And I was like, this will be the best, because everyone in a fundraising situation is like, how long have you guys known each other? And I can
Yeah.
tell all these crazy stories of like, here's us as
Losing my face long.
here's him saving my face, 8 months ago. So it's fun to be able to work with the people you work with, but also have them surf with you and save the day.
That's sick. Did you ever surf that left under the Golden Gate?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that good?
No,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
but it's like on the right swell, you can get a few turns in there.
Yeah.
Weird thing about it though is you feel like your whole perspective of size is off when you're there, and it's very eerie because everything's so massive. Like if you're surfing at Fort Point, you're sitting there and the Golden Gate Bridge is over your head, and you're like, this thing is like you're at the base of it at the very bottom. You don't realize the sheer scale of how massive that bridge is. And
Right.
then you're just like sitting there awkwardly floating next to it, and it doesn't feel weird. And then like big tankers come in, and it just feels sketchy. Like it feels very like I don't know what's going on. And it's also
Yeah.
very localized. I mean, it sounded like you surf Topanga. Like Topanga was always to me the more locally spot in Malibu because there's one really good takeoff spot and everyone's protective of it.
Right.
Same thing with Fort Point, but like it's like a PM from Facebook yelling at you on like a foam board, and they're equally aggro and angry about it. And so I don't know. It wasn't my scene, but I would go like it's one of those things where it was so close to my house. I'd walk my dog there, and you'd see it like picturesque one day, and you'd be like, you know what? I'm gonna go grab my board and have an awful time and try to catch one or two waves and get it. And it's also freezing too,
Yeah.
so yeah, didn't do it a lot.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's so funny. What's your board of choice? Last question.
I'm a big Channel Islands guy, um, and
Are you on like a dumpster diver, Dane Reynolds kind of?
obviously grew up loving Dane.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Grew up with a dumpster diver. I did have a dumpster diver. In that same era, I surfed a Fred Rebel, which is like
Oh,
actually
sure.
like the one that I like the most. And then
Is that a quad?
no, it's a
It's a
thruster.
thruster. Okay.
Yeah. And then now I think I surf a Neckbeard 3 the most.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's Southern California wave, so it's, higher volume, really flat, no rocker, just chunky shortboard, fun board kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But then I love to buy surfboards, so I have a quiver that, is a bunch of stuff bunch of like 20s that I don't even surf, like just like stuff that I think is fun to own and will impulsively buy.
Yeah. I early days of Standard H, it was very much a Southern California lifestyle brand, as if we
Yeah,
needed another one of those. But before I like really leaned into the car thing. Um and I actually did my own fish. It's a 5.8 fish, twin glass on wood fins.
amazing. Yeah.
And
You
it's an
did your own, like
incredible
you
board.
you made your own.
I didn't personally shape it. I contracted out a local shaper, my buddy Todd McFarland, who's like the man, and he actually did a ton of the fish skits for Channel Islands. He was a ghost
I
shaper
have a fish
for
kit. Yeah.
CI. Yeah, so my board is like not a fish skit, but it's like somewhere between a fish skit and like a Christensen fish.
Got it. Yeah.
And it's sick. But I need some size. It's not as voluminous as some can be. Like I'm a big Jeff McCallum fan, and Jeffs have a lot more volume. Anyway, I used to have like 6 or 7 surfboards, which is kind of like the average number if you really have a quiver. But now I'm down to like 3. So
Yeah, I've never. It's funny. It's inverse of like me talking about collecting watches and having liquidity and trading in it. I've never sold a surfboard.
oh, that's funny.
I have surfboards like thrown in my garage. That one of the fun things I did as a kid is and my dad obviously would help with this, but I would take old surfboards that I don't surf anymore, and I would kind of like hollow out channels and put LED lights in them and then reglass them. And then so we could surf them at night and do like cool graphics and stuff with them. I got obsessed with that.
Whoa.
And so I did a few of those with like old. There was it was a shaper in Malibu, and it was called Lala. It was like the Lalanes, and that was the surfer, the shaper. And so I had a bunch of his boards, and they were like these like super experimental, like swallowtail-y, but like performance top, like almost like if you know the CI modern lineup, like the fish beards.
Okay.
It's like a high performance kind of like dumpster diver nose with a fish tail,
Interesting.
twin fin. And so it was like they're just like funky boards that you bring on a surf trip and you surf once and you're like, that was so freeing, but you're like, I wish I had a thruster because the waves are
Right.
good. I had a bunch of those, and so I would just like hollow them out and put lights in them. And so I did that a bunch in college too, and we shot a bunch of videos doing it. And that was like my first foray into content and making stuff.
Oh, that's funny. Well, dude, thanks so much, man. This was a ton of fun. Obviously, we could talk for hours on surfing and board shapes, and designs and stuff, of course. But yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. I've really enjoyed sharing your story, man. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard H podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.